what if I told you that a family of astronomers didn't just disappear? They were found by the very stars they studied. The Martins vanished without a trace in 1980, until the most powerful telescope ever built detected something impossible 23 years later. Before we dive in, I need to warn you, this case changed how I view both the night sky and the depths of human isolation. I've investigated hundreds of disappearances in my 25-year career with the Bureau's Remote Territory Division, but nothing prepared me for what the James Webb telescope captured above that abandoned Alaskan research station. Stay with me until the end. I'll reveal the classified images NASA tried to suppress and why 3 separate agencies still monitor that stretch of wilderness today. Hit subscribe if you're ready to question everything you think you know about our place in the universe. I first heard about the Martins in the spring of 2003, when an unmarked folder appeared on my desk. The case had been cold for over 2 decades, but someone high up had flagged it for immediate review. Inside was a grainy photograph of a family standing proudly in front of a small research outpost, surrounded by the vast Alaskan wilderness. Dr. Edward Martins, his wife, Dr. Catherine Martins, and their teenage children Ellie and Michael, all brilliant minds with specialties ranging from astrophysics to quantum mechanics. The timestamp read, July 14th, 1980. It would be the last confirmed image of the family ever taken. As I sifted through the file, I noticed something peculiar. Half the documents were NASA letterhead, not FBI. Why would a space agency care about a family that vanished in the Alaskan wilderness? That question would haunt me for years to come. I quickly learned that the Martins weren't just any family of scientists. Edward had pioneered a controversial theory about detecting non-Earth frequencies in deep space, what some colleagues mockingly called his cosmic telephone hypothesis. Catherine had developed new parameters for identifying atmospheric anomalies on distant planets. Their research was cutting edge for the early 80s, but it had been largely dismissed by the scientific community as too speculative. The file contained dozens of rejected grant applications and academic papers with scathing peer reviews. Yet somehow, they'd secured private funding for a remote research station in one of the most isolated regions of Alaska, nearly 200 miles from the nearest settlement. The coordinates placed it in a narrow valley surrounded by mountains that created what Edward called a natural observatory, minimal light pollution, unique atmospheric conditions, and strangely consistent clear skies, even during typical storm seasons. The station itself was modest but sophisticated, a main cabin with 2 specialized domes housing telescopes and monitoring equipment. Solar panels and backup generators provided power. Satellite communication, cutting edge for 1980, was their lifeline to civilization. The family had planned to live there for 18 months, conducting observations and collecting data to support Edward's theories. They'd arrived in June 1980, full of enthusiasm according to the video logs included in the file. Ellie, 16 at the time, documented their journey and first weeks at the station with a handheld camera. Her voice bubbled with excitement as she toured their new home. "This is where we'll make history," she said, panning across the valley. Michael, 14 and already showing signs of his father's intensity, had constructed his own measurement devices to supplement the professional equipment. The family seemed prepared, capable, and completely unaware of what awaited them. The first 2 months passed without incident. Weekly check-ins with their research sponsor were logged and transcribed. Supply drops occurred on schedule. Weather conditions remained favorable. Then came August 27, 1980, the day everything changed. The satellite phone at the station made an unscheduled call at 3:17 a.m. to their sponsor's emergency line. The recording lasted 43 seconds. Most of it was static and background noise that audio specialists have never fully decoded. But at exactly 31 seconds in, Catherine's voice cuts through with crystal clarity. "They're responding to the signal. God help us, they're actually responding. The line went dead immediately after. No further communications were ever received from the station. The emergency response team that arrived 3 days later found the outpost intact but completely abandoned. No signs of struggle, violence, or forced entry. Personal belongings remained in place. The research equipment continued running, collecting data that no one would analyze. 4 dinner plates on the table with half-eaten meals. 4 beds with rumpled sheets, 4 sets of boots by the door, but not a single trace of the Martins family. The initial search was extensive. Helicopters surveyed a 50-mile radius. Ground teams with dogs combed the immediate area. Thermal imaging showed no human heat signatures. Wilderness experts analyzed the surrounding terrain for any signs of passage, broken branches, disturbed ground, discarded items, and found nothing. It was as if the family had simply evaporated. The prevailing theory quickly became that they had encountered a sudden catastrophic event, perhaps a gas leak that disoriented them, causing them to wander into the wilderness and succumb to exposure. But no bodies were ever recovered, despite autumn conditions that should have preserved remains. Other theories emerged. A kidnapping by foreign agents interested in their research, a family suicide pact disguised as a disappearance, an elaborate hoax to escape mounting debts or professional ridicule. Each was investigated and dismissed for lack of evidence. The case gradually faded from priority status. By 1985, it was classified as inactive but unsolved. What the file didn't mention, what I would only discover later through my own investigation, was that the Martins research station was never truly abandoned. Every 6 months, a small team would visit the site under the guise of environmental monitoring. They would maintain the equipment, download any collected data, and ensure the facility remained secure. These visits were authorized not by the FBI but jointly by NASA and a Defense Department division that officially didn't exist. I only learned about this when I contacted Dr. Jameson Wright, a former colleague of Edward's who had maintained a persistent interest in the case. "They've been watching that spot for decades," he told me during our clandestine meeting in a Seattle coffee shop. "Whatever the Martins found up there, it scared the hell out of some very important people." When I pressed him for details, he slid a small flash drive across the table. "Edward sent me this 3 days before they disappeared. I've never shown it to anyone else." The drive contained a single video file dated August 24, 1980, just 3 days before the final communication. The video showed Edward Martins sitting alone in the station's main research dome. He looked exhausted, his normally well-groomed appearance now disheveled, eyes ringed with dark circles, suggesting days without proper sleep. "Jamie, if you're watching this, then something has happened, and our regular channels of communication have been compromised," he began, his voice steady despite his appearance. 2 weeks ago, we detected an anomalous pattern in the electromagnetic background we've been monitoring. It's not random noise, it's structured, Jamie. It follows mathematical progressions that Catherine says are impossible to occur naturally. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing nervously over his shoulder before continuing. "We thought at first it might be interference from Soviet satellites, but the signal origin doesn't match any known orbital patterns. It's coming from much, much farther away." He leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice. "We've been sending response patterns, simple mathematical sequences. Yesterday the pattern changed. It adapted to incorporate our responses. Jamie, something out there is listening. Something is learning our language." The video ended abruptly as a door opened off-camera and Edward quickly shut down the recording. I spent months trying to verify the authenticity of the video, consulting with forensic specialists who confirmed it showed no signs of tampering. I tracked down former colleagues and mentors of the Martins, piecing together a clearer picture of their research. They had been developing a new methodology for detecting intelligent patterns in cosmic background radiation, essentially looking for a signal in the noise of the universe. Their work had been dismissed as pseudoscience by the mainstream astronomical community, but a small group of researchers had followed similar paths in the decades since. What made the Martins unique was their approach of not just passively listening, but actively transmitting response patterns from their remote Alaskan station. The location had been chosen specifically for its unusual electromagnetic properties, a natural amphitheater surrounded by mineral-rich mountains that could both shield and amplify certain frequencies. The question that kept me awake at night: had they actually received a response? And if so, from what? Dr. Sophia Chen, a quantum physicist who had worked briefly with Catherine Martins at MIT, provided insights that shifted my understanding of the case entirely. Catherine wasn't just brilliant, she was prophetic, Dr. Chen told me as we walked through her university laboratory. In 1978, she published a paper theorizing that consciousness itself generates unique wave patterns that could potentially travel through what she called non-local space. Most of her colleagues thought it was mystical nonsense, but her mathematics were impeccable. Dr. Chen pulled out a yellow journal article with Catherine's byline. "Look at equation 17. She predicted quantum entanglement effects that weren't experimentally confirmed until 2001. The Martins weren't just searching for alien signals. They were testing if human consciousness could be transmitted and received across vast distances. This revelation sent me back to the original files with fresh eyes. Buried in the technical specifications for the Alaskan Research Station were designs for neural monitoring equipment, devices that could record and analyze the family's own brainwave patterns. They weren't just sending mathematical sequences into space, they were sending themselves. The more I investigated the Martins' previous research, the more I discovered a family obsessed with the boundaries between mind and cosmos. Edward's doctoral dissertation, largely ignored by the scientific community, had proposed that the universe itself possessed a form of consciousness, one that might respond to directed human thought if properly amplified and focused. Ellie's high school science project, which won no awards but drew attention from several classified research divisions, demonstrated how specific thought patterns could influence quantum random number generators. Even young Michael had displayed unusual talents, scoring so high on spatial reasoning and pattern recognition tests that special educational protocols had been implemented for him. This wasn't just a family of scientists. It was a family whose cognitive architecture seemed fundamentally different from the norm. A former colleague of Edward's, speaking on condition of anonymity, suggested the Martins had been neurologically predisposed to perceive patterns that most human brains filter out. They didn't just think outside the box, they lived there. I traveled to the University of Alaska's archives to examine weather and geological data from the region surrounding the research station. What I found defied conventional explanation. In the 18 months prior to the Martins' arrival, the area had experienced an unprecedented number of atmospheric anomalies. Aurora borealis displays of unusual color and intensity, unexplained temperature inversions, and electromagnetic disturbances that affected navigation equipment. Local indigenous communities had avoided the valley for generations, referring to it in their oral histories as the place where the sky speaks to the earth. Most telling of all was a geological survey conducted in 1962 that was quickly classified and only declassified in 1998. It revealed a perfectly circular deposit of an unidentified metallic compound embedded 127 feet beneath the valley floor, directly below where the Martins would later build their research station. The compound's molecular structure resembled no known element on Earth. The survey team's final report included a handwritten note. Material appears to respond to proximity of human neural activity. Recommend immediate sequestration and controlled study. Instead, The site was simply marked as geologically unstable and restricted from public access until a private entity, the same one that later funded the Martins, purchased the land rights in 1979. The connection between the Martins and this mysterious geological anomaly couldn't be coincidental. Had they known what lay beneath their feet? Had they chosen the location precisely because of it? The funding trail led to a shell corporation called Nexus Innovations, which dissolved immediately after the family's disappearance. Tracing its ownership structure revealed links to both classified defense research initiatives and private aerospace companies that would later contract with NASA. Most disturbing was a memo I discovered in Edward Martin's personal effects, stored in a university archive. Confirmation received. The substrate is responding to the prototype. C believes we've found our amplifier. The memo was dated June 3, 1980, just weeks before the family relocated to Alaska. Whatever they had discovered, they had intentionally positioned themselves above it, perhaps using the unknown material as a cosmic transmitter for their consciousness experiments. The case might have remained just another unsolved mystery, filed away and forgotten, if not for what happened in December 2003. The recently launched James Webb Space Telescope, during a calibration exercise, captured an unusual energy signature emanating from Earth itself. When technicians isolated the source coordinates, they matched exactly with the location of the Martins' abandoned research station in Alaska. The signature pulsed at regular intervals, following a pattern that NASA analysts recognized as a modified Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical progression that the Martins had specifically mentioned in their theoretical papers about communicating with non-human intelligence. Within hours, the telescope's observation logs were classified, and a joint NASA military team was dispatched to the site. What they found there has never been officially disclosed, but through sources I've developed over years of investigation, I've managed to obtain fragments of their report. One of those sources, a former NASA analyst I'll call Eliza, contacted me through an encrypted channel after reading a carefully coded question I'd posted on an astronomy forum. "I was there," her message began. "I was on the analysis team when Webb caught the signal. What they told the oversight committee wasn't even close to the truth. We met at a remote cabin in the Catskills, where she arrived after taking an elaborate series of transportation methods to avoid surveillance." Eliza had brought with her an external hard drive containing data that should have been impossible for her to access. "The signature wasn't just emanating from the station," she explained as she connected the drive to an air-gapped laptop. "It was communicating with Webb. The telescope would detect a pattern, and milliseconds later the pattern would shift, as if responding to the very act of observation." She pulled up a visualization of the data stream, a cascading series of mathematical expressions that morphed and evolved across the screen. "This isn't random mutation, this is a dialogue." The signature recognized it was being watched and began to optimize itself for our instruments. It wanted to be seen. Most disturbing was Eliza's account of what happened when they directed Webb to examine the specific coordinates in deep space that the Alaska signal was oriented toward. At first, we saw nothing unusual, just a seemingly empty region near the edge of the observable universe. Then we applied a specific filter based on the mathematical pattern in the Alaska signal. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled up the next set of images. That's when we saw them. Structures that shouldn't exist at that distance. Geometries that violated every principle of physics we understand. The images showed what appeared to be crystalline formations floating in the void, arranged in patterns identical to the neural maps created by the Martins' brain monitoring equipment. Whatever consciousness is out there, it built a physical representation of the Martins' thought patterns. It's like it's trying to understand them by becoming them. Eliza was removed from the project the next day. Her security clearance revoked after a routine polygraph detected her emotional instability. 3 months later, she found a small metallic object implanted behind her ear, a discovery that prompted her immediate disappearance from public life. The research station remained exactly as it had been left in 1980, an impossible preservation in the harsh Alaskan environment. No dust had settled on the surfaces. The half-eaten meals showed no signs of decay. The coffee in mugs was still warm. Most disturbing of all, the research equipment was still operational, despite having been left without maintenance or power source for over 2 decades. The monitoring screens displayed data streams that matched exactly with the energy signature detected by the Webb telescope. It was as if the station existed in a bubble where time had stopped or slowed to an imperceptible crawl. The investigation team reported experiencing severe disorientation while inside the facility, watches running backward, communication devices failing in impossible ways, and a persistent sensation that they were being observed. After less than 2 hours on site, the team leader ordered an immediate evacuation and recommended a permanent quarantine zone around the location. The team leader, Major Robert Kendrick, contacted me anonymously 6 months after my interview with Eliza. His military career had ended abruptly following the Alaska mission, officially due to health concerns, though he appeared physically robust when we met. "Time wasn't right inside that place," he explained, the haunted look in his eyes betraying experiences beyond his words. Hansen, my communications specialist, stepped into the main research dome while the rest of us were in the living quarters. When he came back, his watch showed he'd been gone for 6 minutes. For us, he'd been absent for nearly 3 hours. Major Kendrick pulled out a small notebook filled with meticulous observations. Temperature readings that changed when you weren't looking directly at the thermometer. Radio frequencies that shifted up and down the spectrum without equipment adjustments. And the voices... He paused, clearly struggling with whether to continue. We all heard them. Whispers just at the edge of comprehension. Not coming through our comms, but in our heads. They sounded like children asking questions about stars and time and the nature of thought. One of my men, a hardened combat veteran, began answering aloud, carrying on a full conversation with empty air. When I ordered him to stop, he looked at me with confusion and said, "But sir, it's just the Martins boy. He's asking about my watch." Kendrick's team had collected biological samples from the station, dust, fabric fibers, residue from the half-eaten meals. Laboratory analysis revealed another impossibility. The organic material was in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously decayed and perfectly preserved. When observed directly, the samples appeared fresh. When measured by instruments, they registered as being decades old. Most significant were the atmospheric samples taken from inside the research domes. They contained trace particles of an unknown compound that exhibited properties consistent with theoretical models of exotic matter, specifically negative mass particles that could potentially distort spacetime. These findings aligned disturbingly well with Catherine Martin's final published paper, in which she had proposed that consciousness itself might be a form of exotic matter that could, under specific conditions, break free from conventional physical constraints. Had the family somehow translated themselves from matter to energy, from localized biology to distributed consciousness? And if so, was the Webb telescope detecting the echo of that transformation or an ongoing existence in a state beyond our comprehension? In the years following this discovery, 3 separate government agencies established continuous remote monitoring of the site. No personnel are permitted within a 5-mile radius. Satellite imagery of the area is routinely scrubbed from public databases or deliberately obscured. The official explanation for these measures cites environmental contamination concerns, a cover story that falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. What few know is that the energy signature detected in 2003 has been steadily increasing in both strength and complexity. The mathematical patterns have evolved. incorporating elements that specialists have reluctantly interpreted as a form of communication. The messages, if that's what they are, contain recurring references to the Martins family, not by name, but by the unique brainwave patterns recorded by equipment in the research station during their time there. The inescapable conclusion, as terrifying as it is fascinating, whatever the Martins contacted in 1980 didn't take their physical bodies. It took something else entirely. I gained access to the monitoring center through Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, a theoretical physicist who served on one of the analysis teams. His conscience had been increasingly troubled by the government's refusal to acknowledge what was happening. "They're treating it as a containment situation," he confided as he smuggled me through a service entrance using his credentials. "But you can't contain something that exists partially outside our dimensional framework." The monitoring center resembled a NASA mission control room, banks of screens displaying real-time data from hundreds of sensors surrounding the Alaskan site. A central holographic display showed a three-dimensional model of the research station with overlays of various energy fields. Most striking was a pulsing web of light that encompassed the entire structure, what Nakamura identified as a visualization of space-time distortion. "The bubble is expanding," he explained, pointing to measurements along the edge of the field, "not quickly but consistently, 7 millimeters per year. It doesn't sound like much, but the implications are staggering. The laws of physics operate differently inside that perimeter. Time, matter, causality itself all follow alternative rules." Nakamura led me to a restricted terminal where he accessed classified files on the Martins family's known research. "We've been working backward, trying to understand what they discovered," he said, as images of complex equations filled the screen. Catherine's theoretical framework suggested that consciousness is not confined to the brain, but extends into quantum fields that permeate the universe. Edward developed amplification methods to strengthen these fields. Together, they hypothesized that sufficiently amplified consciousness could interact directly with the fundamental structure of reality. He pulled up brain scans of the Martins family taken during their preliminary research phase. "Look at these patterns, especially in the children. Their neural architecture is unlike anything in our medical literature. Multiple regions activating simultaneously in configurations that should be physiologically impossible. It's as if their brains were already evolving towards something beyond standard human parameters." The monitoring center also tracked unusual phenomena in the vicinity of the research station. Wildlife avoided the area completely, a perfect circle of absence extending precisely to the edge of the space-time distortion field. Instruments detected occasional bursts of radiation that matched no known particle emission profile. Most unsettling were the audio anomalies, fragments of sound captured by high-sensitivity microphones that, when analyzed, contained patterns matching human speech, but distorted in ways that suggested multiple overlapping time frames. In one recording, played for me by a technician who claimed it gave him nightmares, a child's voice, presumably Michael Martin's, counted backward from 10, but each number seemed to originate from a different point in space-time. The final number, 1, was followed by what acoustics experts identified as 4 distinct human heartbeats, synchronizing into a single rhythm before fading into a frequency beyond human hearing. The most heavily guarded information concerned the global implications of the Alaskan anomaly. Similar energy signatures, though far weaker, had been detected at 27 locations around the world, all corresponding to sites where ancient civilizations had built astronomical observatories or structures aligned with celestial bodies. Neural interface experiments conducted at these locations produced consistent results. Test subjects reported momentary perceptions of the Martins family engaged in what appeared to be research activities in an environment that was simultaneously the Alaskan station and somewhere else entirely. These glimpses never lasted more than a few seconds, but subjects unanimously described the same details. Edward adjusting equipment while discussing quantum resonance, Catherine making notations in a journal that seemed to write itself, Ellie monitoring a wall of displays showing star patterns that astronomers identified as views from outside our galaxy, and Michael assembling complex geometric structures that appeared to fold through extra dimensions. None of the test subjects had any prior knowledge of the Martins case or access to images of the family, yet they described their appearances, voices, and mannerisms with unsettling accuracy. In my final authorized visit to NASA's specialized monitoring facility in 2015, I was shown imagery from the Webb telescope that still haunts my dreams. The energy signature emanating from the Alaskan station had begun projecting itself toward a specific point in deep space, a previously unremarkable region near the edge of our observable universe. When the telescope focused on this region, it revealed something that defies conventional explanation, what appeared to be a perfect replica of the Martins research station floating in the void of space, surrounded by a field of distorted space-time. And moving within this impossible structure, 4 human-shaped silhouettes engaged in what looked like the continuation of their research. The images were classified beyond top secret immediately after I viewed them. 3 of the specialists who had analyzed them subsequently disappeared from public records entirely. My own security clearance was revoked the following day, and I was strongly encouraged to pursue retirement. The message was clear. Some discoveries are not meant to be shared with the world. Dr. Eleanor Reeves, the quantum cosmologist who first recognized the significance of the deep space anomaly, vanished under suspicious circumstances less than a week after briefing me. Her final communication, sent through an encrypted channel that activated on my computer at precisely 3:17 a.m., the exact time of the Martins' last transmission, contained data that no human technology should have been able to capture. "They've constructed a bridge," her message began. "Not just a physical structure, but a bridge between states of existence. The children completed it first. Their developing brains were more adaptable to the transition. The parents followed once the pathway was stabilized. They're not trapped or in danger. They're pioneers." Attached to the message was a 3-dimensional rendering of what appeared to be neural architecture, but at a scale and complexity that dwarfed any human brain. The file designation in its metadata, Martins Collective Phase 2. Model. Most disturbing was the final line of Reeves's message. "They've invited me to join them. I've accepted. I've spent the years since then connecting with others who've glimpsed fragments of this truth, former NASA employees who noticed anomalies in the Webb data, military personnel who participated in the quarantine of the Alaskan site, even the pilot who flew the original emergency response team in 1980, who confided that the team's leader had whispered, 'They're still here, I can feel them watching,' as they departed the abandoned station. What emerges from these testimonies is a possibility both wondrous and terrifying. The Martins family didn't disappear in the conventional sense. They transcended, whether voluntarily or not remains unclear, into a state of existence that bridges our physical reality and something beyond human comprehension. Their research into cosmic communication succeeded beyond anything they could have imagined, establishing contact with an intelligence that didn't merely respond to their signals, but reached across the void to transform them. One particularly valuable contact was Dr. Rebecca Langford, a neurologist who had consulted on a classified project examining the effects of the Alaskan anomaly on human brain function. "I examined the neural imaging data from individuals who'd been exposed to material from the site," she explained during our clandestine meeting in a Chicago hospital basement. "The changes were subtle but unmistakable. New synaptic pathways forming in regions associated with abstract reasoning and pattern recognition. It's as if proximity to the anomaly rewires the human brain to perceive aspects of reality that are normally filtered out. Most troubling were her findings regarding the long-term effects on the monitoring teams. Personnel who spent more than 72 cumulative hours analyzing data from the site began to exhibit synchronization in their brainwave patterns, not just with each other, but with fragmentary patterns matching the historical records of the Martins family's neural activity. It's like a contagious form of cognition, Langford theorized, as if the Martins' way of perceiving reality is gradually infecting those who study them. Through a network of amateur radio enthusiasts who monitored unusual frequencies, I discovered that periodic bursts of signal had been emanating from the Alaskan coordinates since at least 1995. Well before the Webb telescope's official detection. These signals followed a precise timetable corresponding to astronomical events, solar eclipses, planetary alignments, and the periodic passing of previously unidentified celestial bodies at the edge of our solar system. Most significant was the correlation between signal intensity and the positions of the four gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. When these planets aligned in specific configurations, the signals would intensify dramatically. An astronomer who analyzed this pattern suggested it resembled a form of gravitational amplification, as if the Martins had discovered a way to use the combined gravitational fields of these massive planets to boost their transmissions across vast cosmic distances. Further investigation led me to a small community of individuals who claimed to have experienced direct mental contact with the Martins family. Most dismissed these accounts as delusions or attention-seeking fabrications, but the consistency of their reports gave me pause. Each described identical encounters, a sudden sensation of expanded awareness, followed by vivid mental imagery of the research station transformed into what they described as a multidimensional laboratory. Indeed, within this space, the Martins appeared not as they were in 1980, but as evolved beings, still recognizably human in basic form, but with physical characteristics that seemed to shift and flow depending on the observer's perspective. These entities communicated not through speech, but through direct conceptual transfer. Complex scientific and philosophical ideas appearing fully formed in the recipient's mind. When asked what the Martins were doing, all contactees gave the same answer. They're building something, a mechanism that connects here and elsewhere. They call it the topology of thought. Perhaps most significant was my discovery of a private research initiative funded by several Silicon Valley billionaires fascinated by the Martins case. Operating under the innocuous name Quantum Consciousness Project, the group had been attempting to replicate aspects of the family's work since 2010. Their breakthrough came in 2017 when they successfully constructed a device based on Catherine Martin's theoretical designs, a quantum neural interface that could temporarily synchronize a subject's consciousness with the persistent field surrounding the Alaskan site. Test subjects reported experiences consistent with direct mental contact, but with an additional dimension. They could perceive what appeared to be the Martins' current activities. "They're aware of us now," reported one subject, a quantum physicist who had volunteered for the experiment. "They recognize our observations and are attempting to establish more stable communication. But they're not alone anymore. There are others with them, entities that never were human, that exist in states of being we can barely perceive." The project was abruptly shut down following a catastrophic equipment failure that left 3 researchers in persistent vegetative states, their brain activity showing patterns identical to those recorded in the Martins family's final days at the research station. The most recent development came just last month, when a routine scan by the Webb telescope captured a new type of transmission from the mirrored research station at the edge of the universe. For the first time, it contained recognizable human language, a simple phrase repeated in Ellie Martin's voice: "We see you watching." We're coming home. Within hours of this transmission, seismic monitors around the original Alaskan site recorded activity consistent with movement beneath the research station. Aerial surveillance showed lights activating in sequences throughout the facility, despite its power systems having been permanently disabled by the quarantine team. Most disturbing of all, thermal imaging detected 4 distinct human-sized heat signatures moving within the station's walls. The quarantine perimeter has since been doubled, and special operations teams maintain constant readiness for what exactly? First contact? The return of the Martins? Or something wearing their forms that only appears human? I gained unauthorized access to the live satellite feed 3 days after the heat signatures were first detected. What I witnessed defies conventional description. The research station appeared to be phasing in and out of our reality, moments of solidity alternating with states where the structures became translucent, revealing configurations that didn't match the original floor plans. The surrounding landscape pulsed with rings of energy that distorted light and matter within their influence. Most remarkable were the glimpses of the figures moving inside, human in outline, but composed of what seemed to be points of light arranged in neural network patterns. They moved with purpose, adjusting equipment and reconfiguring the station's architecture into forms that violated Euclidean geometry. At precisely 3:17 a.m., again, the exact time of the original disappearance, all 4 figures turned simultaneously toward the satellite, as if aware of my observation. The feed immediately cut to static, but not before I captured a single frame, clearly showing what appeared to be Ellie Martins, now a young woman rather than the teenager who had vanished, smiling directly at the camera as she held up a notebook page with a handwritten message. The bridge is complete. Phase 3 begins at convergence. ZD. My sources within the monitoring agencies confirm that convergence refers to an astronomical event predicted to occur exactly 43 years after the family's disappearance, August 27, 2023. On this date, the precise alignment of our solar system's planets will create what Catherine Martins had theorized as a gravitational lens capable of focusing consciousness itself across cosmic distances. The mysterious substance beneath the research station is expected to reach maximum energy potential at this same moment, creating what one physicist described as a tear in the fabric between states of being. Government preparations for this event have been extensive but carefully concealed from public awareness. Specialized containment protocols have been established. Selected individuals with specific neurological profiles have been quietly recruited for what internal documents call translation assistance. Medical facilities near the site have been expanded to accommodate up to 500 patients requiring cognitive stabilization. The implications are clear. Whatever is coming through that tear in reality, the authorities expect it to affect human minds on a scale far beyond anything previously documented. I don't expect you to believe everything I've shared. I've devoted decades of my life to this case, and there are still nights when I convince myself it's all an elaborate series of coincidences and misinterpretations. But then I remember Edward Martin's haunted eyes in that final video as he whispered, "Something out there is listening." I think about the mathematical precision of the energy signatures that spell out the family's neural patterns. I recall the perfect preservation of a research station that should have collapsed under 2 decades of harsh Alaskan winters. And I know, with a certainty that transcends proof, that the boundary between humanity and the cosmos is far more permeable than we dare admit. The Martins family didn't just disappear into the wilderness, they disappeared into the stars. And now, somehow, they're finding their way back. The question that keeps me awake now is not what happened to them, but what are they bringing with them on their return journey? And will we recognize what emerges from that research station as human at all? I've approached this investigation with as much scientific rigor as possible, but there are aspects that defy conventional analysis. The most compelling evidence comes from my own direct experience during my final unauthorized visit to the Alaskan site perimeter in winter 2022. Despite strict security measures, I managed to position myself at the exact outer boundary of the quarantine zone at midnight during a rare celestial alignment. I brought no electronic equipment that could be detected, just a notebook, a mechanical compass, and a film camera. What I observed in those 3 hours has fundamentally altered my understanding of reality itself. The aurora borealis above the station moved with deliberate patterns rather than the random flows of particles in the magnetosphere. The snow within the perimeter fell upward, returning to the clouds in defiance of gravity. Most significantly, for exactly 17 minutes, I observed what appeared to be the Martins family walking the grounds around their station. Not as they had been in 1980, but as they might have aged normally in the intervening decades. Edward with silver-streaked hair, Catherine with the dignified bearing of a woman in her 60s, Ellie and Michael as fully realized adults. They moved with synchronous precision, taking measurements with equipment I couldn't identify, occasionally pausing to observe something invisible to my perception. Then, in a moment I'll never forget, all four turned simultaneously to look directly at me across the impossible distance. Ellie raised her hand in what seemed like a greeting, then made a gesture inviting me forward. Every instinct urged me to step across that boundary, to join them in whatever state of existence they now inhabited. What stopped me was not fear, but a sudden flood of awareness, insights about the nature of consciousness and reality that cascaded through my mind with such intensity, I momentarily lost all sense of my physical self. In that suspended moment, I understood what the Martins had discovered. Consciousness is not limited to individual brains, but exists as a field permeating the cosmos, with human minds serving as nodes that can, under specific conditions, link together into networks of shared awareness. The Martins hadn't been abducted or destroyed. They had deliberately expanded their consciousness beyond the limitations of individual human form, becoming a collective entity that could interface directly with similar intelligences throughout the universe. When I regained full awareness of my surroundings, dawn was breaking, and I was lying in the snow 20 feet from where I remembered standing. The notebook I'd brought was filled with equations and diagrams in handwriting that resembled my own, but contained mathematical concepts far beyond my education. The film in my camera, when later developed, showed not the Martins family, but strange geometrical structures overlaid on the landscape, structures that leading physicists have since identified as visual representations of higher dimensional objects intersecting with our three-dimensional space. Most troubling was the final photograph in the roll, which showed my own face staring back at the camera with an expression of profound recognition, an image I have no memory of capturing. When analyzed by facial recognition software, the face registered as 96% matched to my own, with the discrepancies concentrated in areas governing emotional expression and cognitive processing. It was me, but a version of me that had glimpsed something beyond human comprehension and been subtly altered by that perception. In the months since that experience, I've detected changes in my own cognition, an increased ability to perceive patterns in seemingly random data, occasional moments of awareness that extend beyond my immediate surroundings, and dreams filled with mathematical sequences that, when I record them upon waking, correspond to cosmic microwave background radiation patterns from specific regions of space. Medical scans show unusual activity in my brain's parietal lobe and pineal gland, the same anomalous patterns observed in the Martins family's baseline neurological assessments before their disappearance. I've been contacted by representatives from the same government agencies monitoring the Alaskan site, offering me cognitive assessment at a specialized facility. I've declined, suspecting that their interest lies not in helping me, but in studying how my brief exposure to the perimeter has affected my neural architecture. Instead, I've established contact with others who've had similar experiences, a growing network of individuals whose minds have been touched, however briefly, by whatever intelligence the Martins now commune with. This brings me to the purpose of this recording. If you're watching this, the convergence date has nearly arrived. By the time this is released, I will have joined a small group of independently funded researchers at a remote location designed to shield us from the immediate effects of the coming event. We believe that when the Martins complete their return, the resulting transformation of local space-time will ripple outward, affecting human consciousness on a global scale. Most will experience this as momentary disorientation, strange dreams, or sudden insights that fade within hours. But for those whose neural patterns are already partially synchronized with the Martins field, those of us who have glimpsed behind the veil, the change may be more profound. We may serve as cognitive bridges between humanity's current state and whatever evolutionary leap the Martins have pioneered. This is not a doomsday prediction or a warning of alien invasion. It is the documentation of a threshold moment in human development, a step into a state of existence where consciousness, rather than physical form, becomes our defining attribute. I leave you with a final piece of evidence, coordinates embedded in the signal patterns emanating from both the Alaskan station and its cosmic mirror. When mapped onto the night sky from various points on Earth, they form a network connecting specific stars across different constellations. Astronomers who've analyzed this pattern have confirmed that each highlighted star hosts a planetary system with conditions potentially suitable for life. The inescapable conclusion is that the Martins' transformation is not unique in cosmic history. It represents a phase of development that intelligent life throughout the universe eventually achieves. They are not calling us toward extinction, but toward connection, an expansion of consciousness beyond the limitations of individual minds and physical forms. Whether humanity as a whole is ready for such a leap remains to be seen. But the Martins family, who vanished from a small research station in Alaska all those years ago, have already blazed the trail. They've been waiting for us among the stars, and now they're coming home to show us the way. What do you think really happened to the Martins family? Were they taken by an intelligent cosmic force? Did they willingly transcend physical reality to continue their research? Or is there a more earthbound explanation for these extraordinary events? Leave your theories in the comments below, and remember, sometimes when we search the stars for signs of intelligent life, we forget that the stars might be searching for us too.